In August 1835, a New York newspaper announced that one of the world's most respected astronomers had found life on the moon. Not moss, not microbes, animals, temples, and winged humanoids, observed in such detail that the report supplied them with a scientific name. There was only one problem. John Herschel, the man credited with this astonishing discovery, had discovered nothing of the kind. He was thousands of miles away at the Cape of Good Hope, doing real astronomy, while someone in New York was building an invented world on top of his reputation. The story was false from the beginning, but it was not careless. Across 6 installments, the newspaper assembled a chain of real names, distant institutions, exact measurements, and fabricated eyewitness testimony. Then, one step at a time, it moved from plausible science to lunar beavers, man-bats, and a fire caused by its own impossible telescope. And just when this looks like a simple story about a city being fooled, the surviving record produces a better twist. Skeptics were calling it a hoax before the serial had even finished. So the mystery is not whether creatures lived on the moon. They did not. The mystery is how a fabrication could borrow a living scientist's authority, become more spectacular with every issue, survive open disbelief, and travel far enough that the real Herschel eventually had to answer questions about discoveries he never made. The newspaper was the New York Sun, founded by Benjamin Day in 1833 and sold for 1 cent. Its formula reached beyond the older commercial and political press. Short, local stories, police reports, advertisements, sports, and copies sold in the street by newsboys. By 1834, the Library of Congress says, the Sun already had the largest circulation in the United States. The Moon series did not rescue a failing paper. It entered an attention machine that was already running. Inside that machine was Richard Adams Locke, a British-born journalist now securely accepted as the author of the Moon Reports. We do not have evidence for a private meeting in which Benjamin Day ordered him to save circulation. We do not know one exclusive motive. Later accounts and scholarship interpret the series partly as satire of extravagant claims about inhabited worlds, while its value as commercial spectacle is obvious. It could do both. What the text itself proves is how the construction worked. It did not begin with Batmen. It earned its way to them. The first support was John Herschel himself. He was real, famous, and genuinely working at the Cape of Good Hope on a major survey of the southern heavens. The distance mattered. News from the Cape could not be checked in New York with a quick reply. His location gave the fiction prestige and delay at the same time. Then came a source that sounded equally respectable. The Sun presented the reports as extracts from a supplement to the Edinburgh Journal of Science. The journal title was real, but the publication had ceased, and this supposed supplement was not. The named correspondent, Dr. Andrew Grant, was introduced as Herschel's assistant and close eyewitness. He was fictional too. The astronomer was real. The assistant was not. The expedition was real. The lunar report was not. Only after those pieces were in place did the serial unveil its instrument. According to the articles, Herschel's team possessed a telescope with a lens 24 feet across, weighing 14,126 pounds, capable of magnifying an object 42,000 times. A so-called hydro-oxygen microscope would enlarge and illuminate the telescope's image. The numbers were gloriously exact. The optical premise was impossible. A microscope cannot restore detail the telescope never resolved. But precision was performing the work of proof. This mattered because the series appeared amid genuine public fascination with astronomy, Halley's Comet, and arguments about whether other worlds were inhabited. The Scottish minister and popular writer Thomas Dick had even calculated immense populations for the solar system, including billions on the moon. That context did not make readers foolish, and it does not prove that everyone accepted Locke's account. It made the subject recognizable. The hoax did not invent the question of life beyond Earth. It attached a spectacular answer to an authority people already knew. Now the reports could begin their ascent. The broad progression moved through lunar geology, water, vegetation, and increasingly remarkable animals. The articles described bison-like creatures and single-horned animals. Then came a tailless beaver that walked on two legs, carried its young in its arms, and supposedly knew how to use fire. The prose maintained the composure of a natural history report even as the moon acquired domestic beavers. That contrast was the engine. Each marvel arrived through the same grave observational voice that had delivered the lens measurements. The serial kept asking for only one additional step. If the instrument could reveal plants, perhaps it could reveal animals. If animals, perhaps intelligent animals. The structure establishes authority before escalating into fantasy. That pattern is visible on the page, even though Locke's private planning process is not. On August 28th, in the fourth installment, the saved reveal arrived. The fabricated observers claimed to see winged humanoids. The report named them Vespertilio-homo, man-bat, granting the invention a learned label as if taxonomy could make it ordinary. These beings were described in the language of scientific classification, not fairy tale. The paper had finally put Batmen on the moon, and it kept going. Later passages inside the fiction added ruined triangular temples and a supposedly superior winged species. Then, the impossible apparatus supplied its own interruption. Sunlight, concentrated through the giant lens, set part of the fictional observatory on fire and stopped the observations. No real observatory burned. No injury is part of the verified account. The invention had become so powerful that, within the story, it consumed its own machinery. The escalation was funny because of the discipline, not because historical readers were stupid. A bipedal beaver was reported with a straight face. A man-bat received a Latin name. A telescope described to the pound became the cause of its own fire. Yet beneath that comedy sat a more serious fact. Every new wonder was still being charged to John Herschel's professional reputation. The familiar version says the public swallowed the entire story and learned the truth only later. The dates refuse that neat ending. By August 29th, while the series was still running, rival newspapers were openly challenging it. The New York Evening Post mocked the account, and the Gloucester Telegraph treated it as moonshine. The sixth and final installment would not appear until August 31st. Disbelief was not an epilogue. Disbelief was part of the original event. That does not mean nobody believed the reports. Some readers and editors took them seriously, while others doubted them, mocked them, or joined the argument. The evidence does not give us a reliable percentage. It gives us something more interesting, a contested sensation. The same report could circulate as revelation, entertainment, professional rivalry, or obvious nonsense. Attention did not require agreement. On August 31st, Locke offered a response so carefully worded that it became part of the comedy. "I did not make those discoveries," he said. Strictly speaking, that was true. He had not made discoveries. He had written reports about discoveries that never happened. The sentence did not plainly deny authorship. It escaped through grammar. The Sun did not clearly identify Locke during the original run, and the available evidence does not support staging a dramatic confession on a later date. A few days later, the joke widened. On September 5th, another paper reprinted Locke's response beside an advertisement offering building lots in the newly described lunar territory. This was not evidence that everybody believed in moon real estate. It was evidence that contemporaries could recognize the absurdity, parody it, and keep the story moving at the same time. Disbelief did not end the event. Disbelief became part of it. The reports were reprinted in the United States and traveled abroad. A surviving illustrated Italian edition from 1836 shows the invented lunar world crossing language and national boundaries. Those facts establish diffusion, not a census of belief. Later retellings supply dramatic circulation and pamphlet figures, but their provenance is inconsistent. The honest claim is large enough. The series attracted wide attention, and reprinting and translation gave it a life beyond the original 6 issues. It also attracted a literary rival. Edgar Allan Poe had published his fictional lunar voyage, Hans Pfaall, in June 1835. He later alleged that Locke's series had drawn on it. The chronology and accusation are real. Plagiarism is not proven. Poe's complaint belongs in the story as another struggle over ownership and interpretation, not as a solved case. Locke's own purpose remains similarly resistant to a single verdict. The series has been interpreted as satire aimed at extravagant inhabited world speculation, including the calculations of Thomas Dick. It also functioned as exceptionally marketable spectacle for the Sun. Satire does not cancel commerce, and commerce does not prove that every reader was deceived. The hoax lasted because it could be consumed in several ways at once. But there was one person who had not chosen any of those roles. John Herschel had not written the reports, supplied the observations, or authorized the use of his name. In an 1826 draft letter, he rejected the claims as nonsense and anticipated the awkward demand for private stories about the man in the moon. The joke that worked in a New York newspaper had become a professional inconvenience for the scientist whose credibility made it work. By January 1837, Herschel told his Aunt Caroline that inquiries about the hoax had reached him in English, French, Italian, and German. That list does not tell us how many people believed. It tells us how far the question traveled. A fabrication launched in New York had crossed borders and languages, then returned to the man at the Cape as something he was expected to explain. This is where the opening contradiction finally closes. The real astronomer was used to authenticate an invented witness, an invented instrument, and an invented moon. Rival editors exposed the fiction before it was finished. Parodists sold imaginary lunar land. Translators and reprints carried it farther. And eventually, the authority borrowed without permission received the bill in the form of repeated inquiry. The Great Moon Hoax was not the first newspaper hoax, the first fake news, or proof that an entire age would believe anything in print. News hoaxes were older, and skepticism was visible in 1835 while the installments were still appearing. Its real achievement was stranger. It created a story that people could help distribute for opposite reasons. Some could entertain the possibility. Others could reject it. Rival papers could attack it. A property advertisement could parody it. Poe could claim priority. Herschel could deny involvement. Every response gave the moon story another context, another audience, another journey. The fiction did not need consensus. It needed attention. Locke's lunar animals were never alive. His telescope never existed. His Dr. Grant never stood beside Herschel at the Cape. But the real names and institutions beneath the invention made it portable, and the serial's escalating wonders made it difficult to ignore. That is why the newspaper did more than put Batmen on the moon. It put them into a public argument, and the argument carried them around the world.